Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're at in the world. Welcome to the third and final day of the 2020 International eConference on Atheism. I'm Dr. Darren Slade. I'm the president of the Global Center for Religious Research, and I'll also be your host for today's presentation. I want to say thank you so much for coming out and supporting us. What's incredible about this three-day academic conference is that you didn't have to buy any airline tickets, you didn't have to get a hotel room. You get to hear the latest philosophical and scientific research on atheism from scholars all over the world, all from the comfort and safety of your own home. So thanks again for being here. Now, I have the distinct privilege of being able to introduce a man who does not need an introduction. You all know him real well, Mr. Aron Ra, and his talk today is on the evolution of religion. Now, of course, Aron is known the world over for being a vocal atheist activist. He is creator of the spectacular atheist blog Reason Advocates on Patheos. He's the official representative of the American Atheists and creator and host of the wildly popular Aron Ra YouTube channel and the Raw Men podcast. He's past president of the Atheist Alliance of America and a prolific debater and critic of creationism. And it's in fact this very last point that I want to emphasize. If you get a chance, you have got to purchase a copy of Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. Now, this book by Aron is easily the most definitive takedown of creation scientists and intelligent design. Now, as many of you already know, creationists in their attack on evolution oftentimes use nice sounding arguments, scientific sounding arguments oftentimes. But what Aron does in this book is he demonstrates just how every single one of those arguments are founded on fundamental scientific, religious, and historical falsehoods. So again, if you get a chance to get this book, I highly recommend it. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's kind of my go-to resource whenever I'm debating or thinking about creationism. Now, I get to turn it over to my good friend Aron here. You have the floor, sir.
All right. I'm sorry to say that my name is pronounced Aron. Sorry.
Of course it is. You should tell, because it wasn't originally that, right? When did you change your name?
No, I changed my last name. Was my birth name was not Ra, but
interesting.
Yeah. So
thank you for saying that. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I was baptized into the Mormon Church when I was 8 years old, but I never identified as Mormon. For a while, we lived in parts of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah where practically everyone was Mormon, or we lived in Los Angeles where being Mormon was weird. And people would ask me, what religion are you? And I would say that, well, my family is Mormon, and then never got far enough to say that I don't know whether I am. Because as soon as anyone thought that I was Mormon, they'd start telling me crazy things that Mormons allegedly believe, as if Mormons wouldn't know what they believe unless they hear it from a Southern Baptist. Sometimes I'd invite them in to tell my mother that she believes all these specific things, but they always refused. And I figured it was because they already knew that my mother didn't really believe all the things that they said that she did. And they didn't want to find out how things really are. They just want to believe what they want to believe, regardless what the truth is. And this is a common trait among religious believers and conspiracy theorists and many forms of prejudice. They just want to believe what they want to believe, even when they know that it's probably wrong. I mean, Mormons do believe some crazy shit. Every religion does. But if you want to know what a Mormon believes or what a Buddhist or a Hindu believes, don't ask a Baptist, because many outsiders would rather give you the wrong answer than to admit that they don't know, especially when that question gives them opportunity to break the ninth commandment by expressing their bigotry. They're not even sure what their own beliefs are, because when I ask Baptists what they believe, I keep getting different answers. I never identified as Mormon because I didn't know whether I believed everything required to be a Mormon. And how would I know whether some other religion might suit me better, since I didn't know anything at all about any of the other religions? Experiencing the kind of interdenominational discrimination that I did set me on a path. I figured that the truth at the heart of the matter would be the root, the foundation, because whatever distinction makes any denomination unique among all the others is not going to turn out to be some profound truth that every other religion around the world had somehow overlooked for thousands of years until this one new cult finally popped up, say in Waco, Texas, 1991, as if they're the only ones who know better than anyone else, and that's why the forces of evil are attacking their compound. No, God would have to be a better communicator than that. Whatever the real truth is, will not be some unique peculiarity where Mormons and Branch Davidians differ from everyone else. The differences are what the group got wrong. The truth will be something held in common by every sect all the way back to the very beginning. So I started comparing religions to trace the origins of the faith. Now, the Mormon prophet Joseph Smith grew up in Western New York, and he was apparently influenced by the intense religious revivalism that Protestants were conducting at that time. So I figured that Smith used Protestant Christianity as his template, and that he created a whole other religion out of that with all new mythology that he wrote himself. Other religions, like Seventh-day Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses and others, seem to branch off of Protestant Christianity too, yet some deny their pedigree, while proclaiming divine revelation to get back to the real, originally intended message, which was somehow never written down anywhere until just now, and only this one little cult knows about it, fuck everyone else. Likewise, Mormons too insist that they're not Protestants, and Protestants insist that Mormons are not even Christian. And I don't see where Protestants get the right to say that they're not. Protestants like to say that Jehovah's Witnesses and aren't really Christians either, and neither are Catholics. When you lump all the self-identified Christians in the world together, including Mormons, JWs, and the whole Christian collective, over half of them are Catholic. So if Catholics are not Christian, then Christianity is no longer the world's leading religion. Islam would be the dominant faith worldwide. This is my rescue kitty. And after Islam would be Hinduism in second place, then Catholicism, and finally Christianity in fourth place. Is that how the Protestants want it? Catholicism claims to be the oldest Christian denomination, although Orthodoxy makes the same claim with more justification, because Christianity took a few centuries to take shape. I would think that God's word would be markedly distinct and definitely superior to anything lowly humans could write. But all the scriptures presented as God-breathed are indistinguishable from the ravings of mere fallible men. So there appears to have been a series of committee decisions required to weed out which gospels and other writings should be included as divinely inspired and which should be denounced and destroyed as damnable sacrilege. Then, as soon as there was a unified Christianity, there was an immediate schism between Orthodox and Catholics who fought bloody wars with each other for centuries after, forgetting all about how to love thy neighbor. Then, of course, Martin Luther started the Protestant Reformation, literally protesting Catholicism with what was then defined as heresy. And those two fought centuries of bloody wars against each other, too, neither one able to turn the other cheek despite what their shared patron deity allegedly advised. At the same time as Joseph Smith, there was another self-proclaimed prophet in Israel who started not just another denomination of Christianity, but a whole other religion apart from that. On the Baha'i webpage, it says that throughout history, God had sent down different prophets, including Abraham, Krishna, Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad, and that Baha'u'llah is the latest of these messengers. The thing is that the Quran says almost exactly the same thing, except that it says that Muhammad is the final prophet and that there would be no more after him. So you try to be inclusive and it still creates conflict. At some point between Muhammad and Baha'u'llah came another prophet, Guru Nanak, in the 15th century in what was then Punjab, India, and is now Pakistan. The message that God delivered to Guru Nanak was that neither of the two great religions is the true path. So Guru Nanak founded Sikhism, currently the world's fifth largest religion, as a middle path between the two great religions, which God identified as Islam and Hinduism. Because somehow Christianity wasn't important enough in medieval Punjab to even get a message, to even get a mention. And God didn't think so. And we know that because his prophet told us. And that's the only way anyone knows anything God ever said. We have to accept whatever the prophets tell us, even when those prophets disagree with each other, such that we know someone's got to be lying. Think about that. It means we don't really know whether God ever even said anything. And if he did, then we know what God should already know, that he shouldn't be using prophets, because they're just going to mess the message up in a game of Chinese telephone, as has reportedly always been the case with every religion ever founded so far. Because every prophet foolishly goes off script and starts his own new and different religion, and every religion gets corrupted by those who believe in it, which ought to tell you that no religion is really true, and that we ought to throw out all our scriptures because they're just man-made mythology written by mere fallible people who obviously never knew what they were talking about. I've heard it said that the reason there are so many different religions is that we're all like blind men trying to describe an elephant according to the one part they can touch. And one part has a trunk or the tusk or a leg or ear or the tail. And all their descriptions are correct, although incomplete. However, that analogy doesn't work with religion because they're all claiming mutually exclusive things. If you're Christian, you're going to the Muslim hell. And if you're Muslim, you're going to the Christian hell. And other options include that you could be reincarnated forever and ever, over and over again, never having achieved either nirvana nor Krishna consciousness. I said in my book that the Jewish Torah, the Christian Gospels, the Quran of Islam, the Kitab-i-Aqdas of Baha'u'llah, the Avestas of Zarathustra, the Adi Granth of the Sikhs, the Hindu Vedas, and the Mahabharata's Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Mormon, and the Urantia book are all declared by some devotees to be the absolute truth and the revealed word of the one true God, and believers of each say the others are deceived. And the only logical probability is that they're all deceived. But of course, religion doesn't listen to reason. Christians often pretend to be unique among religions because the whole world marks a calendar based on the birth of Jesus. And what they don't understand is that there were already a number of conflicting calendars in use all at once. Then in the year 1627, on the Julian calendar, Pope Gregory VIII, arguably the most powerful man in the world at that time, created his own calendar and backdated it to what he thought was Jesus' birthday. He knew that Jesus was supposed to have been born both before the year 41 on the Julian calendar and simultaneously after the 50th year on that same calendar. Unable to admit the impossible contradiction there and with no way to reconcile it, Pope Gregory simply chose a date in the middle and started his Gregorian calendar from there. Then, when the Western world became the financial center that it is, everyone else adopted our calendar too. And that's why this is the year 2020 and not 2065 or 5780 like the Jewish calendar. So when you hear me talk about dates in BC, I mean before calendar, not before Christ. I have met Christians who think that Christianity is the world's oldest religion, forgetting that Jesus himself was described as Jewish and that there can be no Christianity before Christ. And similarly, the Quran says that Islam was the true religion of Abraham, Moses, and even Jesus, meaning that Jesus was actually Muslim rather than Jewish, because Muslims believe that the Jewish and Christian religions, as well as the Bible itself, are all corruptions of the true Word of God. The truth is that Islam is based largely on an early version of Christianity, one that held that Jesus was a mediator between men and God, that he was a prophet with magic powers like many prophets were said to have, regardless of what religion they professed, but that Jesus was not a physical manifestation of the Creator, not God in the flesh, and not the Son of God either. Muslims believe that Jesus was never crucified, that he never died, and that he kept healing people discreetly for centuries after the Gospels, and that he effectively retired after Muhammad became the next and final prophet of the God and religion of Abraham. Christianity, in turn, is based on Judaism, with some Greek and Persian influences, which I'll explain in a moment. So Christianity is mostly Jewish, but Judaism isn't the oldest religion either. It's not even the oldest monotheistic religion, and it didn't start out monotheist. I took a course in the history of comparative world religions, which taught how Judaism was originally polytheist, having evolved out of a collection of closely associated Semitic religions, blended with a compilation of Mesopotamian mythology, and eventually influenced by the Persian religion of Zoroastrianism. with one important distinction. The Jews believed, much like the Greeks and Mesopotamians before them, that everyone goes to the same place when we die, an underworld of the dead where everyone's soul, good or bad, would go to rest, meaning sleep. But Christians changed the Hebrew Sheol into hell, and they came up with the notion of heaven as a posthumous judgment based on a Zoroastrian idea that Judaism never adopted, that the soul of the righteous man will ascend to the kingdom of justice and truth under the wise Lord Ahura Mazda. But the soul of the wicked man will descend into the kingdom of the lie, ruled by Ahriman the opposer, also known as Ha-Shetan, the Satan, which means the opposer or enemy. This is where Christians got the idea that they would go to heaven or hell depending on whether they were good or bad. But an important fact that is always overlooked is that morality is not even part of that equation, because believers can always be forgiven no matter how evil they are, and unbelievers can never be tolerated no matter how good they are. So morality is irrelevant. All that matters is, did you buy into the scam? Are you an obedient minion? Will you do as you're told and pay your tithe? Believe what we say simply because we said so, and don't even ask for evidence. Just take it on faith. Thus, gullibility is the sole criteria for redemption. So if you love sin, whatever that means, be a Christian. If you have a personal relationship with Jesus, then you can sin all you want to. And your magic imaginary friend will always forgive you for it because he's only in your mind. So he already understands and agrees with all your bullshit excuses. If you love truth instead, meaning things we can actually know and show to be true, then no religion will satisfy you. So Islam is based on Christianity, which is based on Judaism, and these three religions of peace have typically been at war with each other since their inceptions. Each of them have been influenced by Zoroastrianism, which isn't the oldest religion in continuous practice either. Hinduism is, and that doesn't mean that Hinduism is the oldest religion there ever was. There are plenty of others that we know of that are older, but they're not practiced much anymore. And while there is a taxonomic tree of sorts to show how the different religions are related, there's no clear connection between the Abrahamic and Indian religions, meaning that one did not come from the other. Well, there is a story in Genesis where Jacob wrestles God and wins, even though God cheated by hitting Jacob below the belt. And there's a similar story in the Mahabharata where King Arjuna wrestled with one of the lesser Hindu gods and won, even though that god also hit Arjuna in the nards. That and Lord Krishna gave sight to the blind, and Indra walked on water. And there's a lot of common tropes of the various religions. Compare the Greek myth of Pandora's box to the temptation of Eve. Then remember that Prometheus was crucified to atone for the sins of man, and Dionysus died and rose again, declaring himself the fruit of the vine, just like Jesus eventually did too. Yet all these myths are many centuries older than any of the stories about Jesus, which tells me that either Dionysus could turn water into wine just like Jesus did, or, and this is infinitely more likely, Jesus didn't really do it either. A lot of folks believe that the book of Genesis is the oldest book ever written. And those people are unaware that there are a few different religions with creation myths that are thousands of years older than even the oldest book of the Bible, which is not Genesis. There are lots of websites saying that the oldest book of the Bible, meaning the first one to be written, is the book of Job, which was often supposed to be from 1500 years before our current calendar. But some scholars have corrected me on this, saying that Job is nowhere near that old, that the oldest books of the Bible are actually Amos and Hosea, dating to the 8th century BC. Interestingly, and I don't know whether anyone else has noticed this coincidence, but although the Rig Veda, the earliest of the Hindu scriptures, is dated to at least 1500 BC, the Bhagavad Gita, which I'm told is the beginning of Chaitanya Vaishnavism or Hare Krishna, was contextually dated to the 6th or 7th century BC because it seems to reference what was being said by Ionian Greeks at that time. The first time an atheist position on secular science was espoused by any collective, and Lord Krishna was complaining about that in the Gita. And then Zarathustra, the prophet of Zoroastrianism, who also hails from the 6th or 7th century BC, And many of the Greek myths and Hellenism were published at about that same time, and much of the Bible was composed in the 6th and 7th century BC. And the first Buddha hails from the early part of the 5th century BC. So not every religion, but most of the ones we know of all appeared at about the same time, a half dozen centuries before Christianity. It was like a Cambrian explosion of several different religious perspectives occurring all at once. And that is when we see the emergence of gods that were more than just people with magic powers, which is what all the gods had been before. Even the Abrahamic God is originally depicted as a magical man who walks, talks, eats, waves his hand, turns his head, shows his backside, and cheats at wrestling. Some of the gods probably started out as powerful people who were grossly exaggerated over many generations, while their real identities were lost in antiquity. And some religions now have the one big all-powerful spirit-type god. Hinduism has that in the form of a triune godhead, but with a bunch of lesser gods mixed in. And some primitive religions have gods that are really just nature anthropomorphized, like the god of rivers, the god of seasons, the god of the hunt, or the god of beer making. And many religions also have a god of death. In the earliest religions, these weren't necessarily gods, but merely spirits. Not every religion had gods, but every religion universally accepted as such by both adherents and critics is a doctrine of ritual traditions, ceremonies, mythology, and the associated dogma of a faith-based belief system that includes the idea that a supernatural essence of self, be it the soul or consciousness or memories, etc., may in some way transcend the death of the physical body and continue on in some other form. Not every religion has gods, but every religion posits the notion of a spirit. In mythology, anything could have a spirit, but every living thing that breathed certainly did. So I want to share some hypotheses I have about how religions began, starting with why we believe in spirits. Why do so many people think that we have an immortal, supernatural soul? We feel the breeze move against our bodies all the time. Early tribes of primitive people couldn't explain the changes in the clouds or the weather they brought, but they knew that the wind could move things, even carry things off into the sky as if held in invisible hands. They didn't know what smoke was, but they thought that dust devils were literally devils. That's where the legends of genies come from. Whirlwinds would appear out of nowhere and throw all your stuff around and then disappear into evanescence. That's how we still imagine spirits today, at least the devilish ones. No one understood diseases either, but they figured out pretty quickly that rancid fumes or the death of a sick person could make others sick too. That's why they say bless you when you sneeze, because sneezing and coughing are how you spread disease. And they thought that when you sneeze, the good spirit leaves your body and an evil spirit might jump in and take its place. If you're sneezing or coughing, then you're spreading evil spirits that might kill you or someone else. Note that in the Bible, God performs a golem spell where he fashions a man out of mud and breathes into it the breath of life to animate it and make it come alive, wherein Adam did not acquire a soul. Instead, he became a living soul. And there were a few other versions of this trope in earlier creation, as from Mesopotamia through the Orient, wherein some form of magician makes a variable number of people come alive by magically animating clay figurines. I imagine that this belief must have prompted someone to try mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and it certainly would have cemented their belief if it worked. There are also other references to this breath of life where the movement of air is akin to a spiritual essence. A traditional Jewish belief is that when newborns take their first breath, they are infused with the spirit and become a living soul. So air equals spirit. The English word spirit comes from the Latin word meaning to breathe. Since no one yet understood that air was made of particulate matter, but everyone knew you would die if you couldn't breathe, and they knew that when people or animals die, they stop breathing, then it was believed that the movement of air was somehow spiritual, and that this spirit went inside you to give you life. In Genesis 1:2, when it says that only the Spirit of God moved over the face of the waters, it's pretty obviously talking about the wind. For another example, Ezekiel 37:5-8 has a necromancer going into a boneyard to revive an army of the dead, wherein, I quote, Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, yet ye shall live. And I will lay sinews upon you, and bring up flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and breathe in you, or put breath in you. And you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and I prophesied, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a shaking, and the bones came together, bone to his bone. And then I beheld, lo, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. Then said he unto me, Prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, son of man, and say to the wind, Thus saith the Lord God, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood up upon their feet, an exceeding great army. I should note that the four winds, or anomoi, animate, were Greek gods, different from Jehovah, the Hebrew volcano god. And it's interesting that Jehovah tells one of his own prophets to pray to the four winds. And of course, the flood in Genesis 6 was meant to drown everything that had the breath of life. Ecclesiastes 3, 18 to 21 gives another example of how our notions of spirituality actually stem from a misunderstanding of the natural aspects of air. I said to myself concerning the sons of men, God has surely tested them in order for them to see that they are but beasts. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have the same breath, and there is no advantage for man over beast, for all is vanity. All go to the same place. All came from the dust, and all return to the dust. Who knows that the breath of man ascends upward, and the breath of the beast descends downward to the earth? Notice here again that if we had a soul, then animals have one too, but we don't. It's just our breath, and all the rest is vanity. And this is according to the New American Standard Bible, the New Revised Standard Version, the American Standard Version, and the King James Version all replace the word breath with spirit. And likewise, if you compare Luke 23:46 in the New American Standard or the New Revised Standard Versions of the Bible with the King James or the American Standard Version, you'll see again that when the story says that Jesus commits his spirit to God and breathed his last, it means the same thing